Be me, 45 years old, tenured professor of women's studies at a respectable state university. 23 years dedicated to creating spaces where women could speak without interruption, where our voices mattered, where we could call out problematic behavior without fear. Published papers on consent frameworks, workplace equity, the importance of believing women's experiences. Never screamed at men on street corners, never demanded ridiculous things. Just wanted fairness and safety. Thought I was building bridges while dismantling harmful structures. Winter semester just started. Noticed something odd in my upper-level seminar. Usual dynamic completely absent. Used to be that male students would occasionally challenge readings, create discussion, sometimes mansplain, but at least engage. Now the 7 guys in my class of 30 just sit there. They take notes, they turn in assignments, they say absolutely nothing. Not hostile silence, not resistant silence, just nothing. Marcus used to participate regularly last year in my intro course. Sharp kid, thoughtful, would sometimes push back on readings in ways that actually enriched discussion. Now he just stares at his laptop. After 3 weeks of this, I keep Andrew after class. Seems approachable. Ask him why he's not engaging with the material. He shifts weight between his feet, does this weird smile that doesn't reach his eyes. Says the readings are interesting and he's learning a lot. When I press him about none of the men participating, something flickers behind his expression. It's probably better if I just listen and learns. Thanks me for my time and leaves before I can ask anything else. That interaction burrowed under my skin for days. Mentioned it to Richard, sociology colleague who's been teaching forever. He gets this look on his face like he's been waiting for someone to notice. Shows me his preliminary data. Reads like a medical examiner's report on something we hadn't realized was dying. Male enrollment in courses taught by women faculty. Down 17% over 6 years. In gender-focused courses specifically, down 32%. Office hour visits from male students to female faculty, down 41%. Participation rates among enrolled men collapsed even more dramatically. But the survey responses gutted me more than the statistics. Anonymous responses from male students across departments. They describe calculating which professors are safe, which classrooms might contain social landmines. One response stays with me. 23-year-old engineering student. He wrote that he wanted to take a class on gender and literature because the books looked interesting. Decided against it because he couldn't risk saying the wrong thing, having it interpreted as threatening or ignorant, becoming an example of what not to do. Another one, business major, 20. Described being interested in a female professor's research, wanted to ask about mentorship, didn't, because he'd have to request one-on-one meetings, and he wasn't going to put either of them in that position. Like meeting with a professor was a minefield requiring careful navigation. Tell myself this is one data set, probably unrepresentative. Start paying more attention, though. Notice my teaching assistant, female graduate student, gets way more questions during her office hours than I do. Male students line up to ask her things they could ask me. When I bring it up, she hesitates. Admits male students have told her they feel more comfortable asking her questions. When she asks why, they say things like, she seems more approachable. They don't want to bother me. She knows it's something else. She can feel the invisible architecture of avoidance, too. Start noticing it everywhere once I'm looking. University implements mandatory mentorship program. Department chair quietly tells me 3 different early career men requested male mentors specifically. When pressed, they gave vague reasons about similar research interests, but their research interests aligned more closely with mine than with the men they requested. The chair looked tired when he told me this. like he's been managing these invisible tensions for a while. Go to department mixer. Try to network with new male faculty hire. Conversation is polite, professional, brief. He positions himself so we're visible from multiple angles. Doesn't step closer when the room gets loud and we can't hear each other. Maintains this careful distance. I'm not imagining it. This is deliberate. Watch him talk to my male colleague later. They're relaxed, laughing, standing close. The ease of it. Something starts gnawing at me. Did what I always do when I need to understand something? Researched. Spent weeks going through studies I normally wouldn't touch. Data on young men's social behaviors, relationship patterns, workplace anxieties. Numbers are staggering. Men aged 18 to 30 reporting romantic relationships, historic lows. Majority of young men now never approach women in public settings at all. Workplace studies showing male colleagues increasingly refuse to travel alone with female colleagues. Won't meet behind closed doors. Always keep third parties present. Rates of young men reporting no close friends up dramatically. Emotional isolation metrics through the roof. Cross-cultural data showing this pattern across multiple Western countries. Found research about men's support groups, the conversations happening there. Themes of fear, withdrawal, calculated risk avoidance. They describe every interaction with women as potential threat to their education, career, reputation. Describe running cost-benefit analyses on simple human interactions. One study includes quotes from interviews with men who've completely stopped dating. A 26-year-old says he went on 3 dates in past 2 years. All disasters. Not because of incompatibility, because he was so anxious about saying the wrong thing that he could barely speak. Another one, 22, describes liking a classmate but never acting on it. His reasoning? Even if she's interested, the risk of misreading signals and making her uncomfortable isn't worth what it might cost him. Talks about it like a math equation. Probability of positive outcome versus magnitude of negative outcome. Negative outcome includes being reported, reputation destroyed, losing educational opportunities. Math doesn't work out in favor of trying. Read about college men who won't study with female classmates alone, won't offer to walk anyone to their car, even when it's late and the parking lot is dark. Taught that women's safety is paramount, interpreted that as meaning their presence is potential threat to that safety. Logical conclusion? Remove themselves. That's when I started examining my own fingerprints on this. 23 years of teaching about power dynamics, about believing women, about how men need to recognize their capacity to intimidate and harm. All true, all important, all necessary. But what did those words sound like to an 18-year-old boy sitting in my classroom? A boy trying desperately to be good, who didn't want to be a threat, who took the lessons seriously. We told them to be aware of their power and the fear they could inspire. We told them women's comfort and safety had to come first. We told them impact matters more than intent. We told them to listen, not speak over, not assume. We told them about all the ways their predecessors had failed and harmed. What we didn't tell them was how to actually interact after internalizing all of that. We gave them a detailed map of every possible way they could screw up without offering directions toward anything right. The boys who were paying attention, the sensitive ones, the conscientious ones, the ones who genuinely cared about doing right, those boys went silent. Withdrawal seemed like the safest option for everyone. Meanwhile, the ones who didn't listen, who didn't care about social feedback, they're still out there approaching women, still taking up space, still confident. We filtered for the worst by making conscientiousness feel dangerous. Started thinking about specific lessons I taught. Unit on microaggressions. Taught students to recognize all the tiny ways men dominate space and conversation. Eye contact duration. Standing too close. Unsolicited conversation as potential harassment. Male students taking notes, nodding along, internalizing. then applying those lessons by avoiding eye contact, maintaining distance, never starting conversations. Perfect students. Did exactly what I taught. Unit on consent. Spent weeks on importance of enthusiastic yes, on how silence isn't consent, on responsibility to ensure comfort. Watched male students become more conscientious, more careful. Also watched them become paralyzed. If anything short of enthusiastic verbal yes is insufficient, and if asking directly seems aggressive, what's left? Apparently nothing. Do nothing. Say nothing. Want nothing. Safest choice. Remember a conference 3 years ago, workshop on addressing male resistance in feminist spaces. We strategized about how to handle men who went quiet in discussions, interpreted silence as hostility, as fragility, as passive aggression. What if it wasn't resistance? What if it was retreat? What if they were doing exactly what we asked, making space, not dominating conversation, listening instead of talking, and we interpreted their compliance as defiance? Sit in my office one afternoon, surrounded by studies and datasets, feel something cracking inside my chest. Dedicated my entire adult life to creating a better world for women, to making spaces safer, to amplifying voices that had been silenced. Never meant for any of this. Never wanted boys to grow into men who are afraid of human connection. Never wanted women to inherit a world where decent men have retreated into protective silence. Summer comes. Have lunch with old friend from graduate school. She went into corporate HR, now VP at major company. Talk about changes we've seen over decades. She tells me about company policies, separation protocols, fear. Says male executives now refuse to sponsor junior women, won't travel together, won't have dinner meetings, won't provide opportunities that require one-on-one time. Company brought in consultants, tried training, tried incentives. Nothing works. Fear is stronger than policy. Says quietly that she thinks we overcorrected. Says she can't say that at work, would be career-ending. But watching women's advancement stall because men won't engage feels like losing ground we fought for. We sit in silence for a while, both thinking about paths that led here, both complicit, both trapped. I think about my own son. He's 28 now. Hasn't had serious relationship in 5 years. Told me last Christmas that dating seems too complicated, too risky, easier to just focus on work and hobbies. He laughed when he said it, thought he was just being picky. Now I wonder what calculations run through his head, what he learned growing up with a mother who taught about consent and power and men's capacity for harm. Think about my nephew, college sophomore, visited last month, mentioned he sits in back of all his classes now. Doesn't ask questions anymore. Don't want to be that guy, he said. When I asked what guy, he shrugged. You wouldn't understand. Maybe I'm starting to. Marcus finally came to office hours near semester's end. First time since September. So nervous. Kept apologizing for taking up my time. Eventually asked question about thesis he's developing. Good question. Insightful. Shows he's been thinking deeply about material. At my door, he paused. I almost didn't come. I know a lot of professors don't want to deal with male students one-on-one anymore. I get it. I understand why. Then, it's lonely, Professor, trying to figure out how to be a good person when every possible action seems fraught. Most of my friends have just given up on trying. Safer to keep your head down, get your degree, get out. He left before I could respond. That word, lonely, echoed through my empty office for hours. His final paper argued that current frameworks create an impossible double bind for conscientious men. Asked to recognize power and privilege, which requires self-awareness and engagement. Simultaneously, asked to step back and make space, which requires withdrawal and silence. Can't do both. Men who choose engagement risk being seen as dominating. Men who choose withdrawal risk being seen as resistant. His conclusion? The only winning move is not to play. So they don't. Gave him an A because the paper was brilliant. Wrote comments encouraging him not to give up on engagement. Even as I wrote it, recognized my own hypocrisy. Can't publish my research on this. Can't speak up at conferences. Can't challenge the prevailing narrative without professional suicide. But I expect him to keep risking what I won't. Hypocrisy tastes bitter. Sat down and wrote essay I'll never publish. Titled it, Men Went Silent Because of Us. Documented everything I found, everything I realized. Wrote about intentions versus outcomes. About how the most conscientious men were most affected. About how we filtered for worse behavior by making good behavior impossible. Wrote about loneliness and isolation and fear. Wrote about my own crisis of faith. Wrote about still believing in equality while recognizing we've created new inequality. Wrote about not knowing how to fix it, about being afraid to even try. Finished it and saved it in folder I'll never open. Too dangerous to share, too important to delete. Testimony to unintended consequences. Evidence of damage we didn't mean to cause. Apology to a generation of young men we taught to disappear. Everything we fought for was necessary. Awareness of harassment, assault, discrimination, accountability, consequences, believing victims, all necessary. But somewhere in the implementation, we built a climate of fear that's consuming everything, including the progress we made. We told them their presence could threaten, so they left. We told them to listen instead of speak, so they went silent. We told them to be aware of their power, so they became powerless. We told them women's comfort came first, so they removed themselves from the equation. Perfect compliance with everything we asked. Catastrophic result we never intended. The men in my classroom aren't hostile. They're not checked out or disrespectful. They're careful, so painfully, deliberately careful. They wait for women to speak first. They measure their words. They make themselves small and quiet and unobtrusive. Everything we said we wanted. Except we also said we wanted engagement and dialogue and connection. Can't have both. They chose the safer option. 23 years building what I believed was a better world. Now sitting with research and testimonies and the quiet devastation of unintended consequences, I can't maintain the certainty anymore. We broke something while fixing something else. Intentions don't prevent damage. I don't know how to repair what we've done. Don't even know if I'm permitted to say it needs repairing. Career and reputation rest on maintaining that everything we did was right, but the silence filling my classroom speaks louder than any lecture I've ever given. Men went silent because of us, and the silence is deafening.